Okay, we're going to keep on practicing. So we're going to practice again with these questions. And it says, Michael made 12 cards on Friday. He made 8 less cards on Saturday. How many cards did he make on Saturday? He made 12 on Friday. He made 8 less on Saturday. Okay, let's start plugging this in. Okay. How many cards did he make on Saturday? Okay, I want to figure out how many were made on Saturday. So let's start plugging this in. I'm going to start plugging this into my strip diagram and we're going to see if it makes sense, okay? So I have one part is 12 cards on Saturday, and I'm going to abbreviate Saturday, and 8 cards less on Sunday. Okay, so if I'm looking at this strip diagram, this tells me that I'm going to add 12 and 8 to give me how many cards he made on Saturday. Does that make sense? Is that a reasonable answer? If he made 8 less on Saturday, he made 8 less than 12. So that you're not going to be adding these two numbers together. You are not going to be adding 8 and 12 together to figure out how many he made on Saturday. He made 8 less on Saturday. 8 less. He made 12 on Friday. If you make less than something, you want to figure out how many less we're going to be subtracting, and this 12 cards is actually going to be your total. 12 cards on Saturday, 8 cards less on Sunday. This is the number of cards made on Sunday. So I would subtract 12 minus 8. This is going to be a subtraction problem. Let me erase this. Okay, let's do this next one. The bookstore has 13 copies of the newest book. They add 7 more copies to the shelf. How many copies do they have now? They have 13. They add more. How many copies do they have now? Well, that means that they had some and then something happened, and I want to figure out how many they have now. They had some. What's the amount that they had? They had 13 and they add 7 more. If you have 13 and you add 7 more, 13 copies of the book, 7 more copies added. 13 is not my total. I want to figure out how many they have now. Sometimes when it says how many they have now, sometimes you're going to subtract, sometimes you're going to add, sometimes you'll multiply. But just because they said how many they have now, that does not always mean subtraction. And another problem that we did earlier, we saw how many do they have now, and I think we were subtracting. You can't listen for keywords, okay? Keywords don't always work, especially in 3rd grade, because there's multi-steps sometimes. So they had a certain amount, they added more. There's your 13 copies, there's your 7 more. This is going to be an addition problem. I'm going to erase this. Okay, let's do this last one. The telephone at a family store rang 156 times in the morning, a bunch during lunch, and 201 times in the afternoon. During the whole day, the phone rang 562 times. How many times did it ring at lunch? During the whole day, the phone rang 562 times. How many times did it ring at lunch? Well, what information are we given? 156 times in the morning, a bunch during lunch, and 201 times in the afternoon. That's your important information. That's what we need to know. And the question is asking us, during the whole day, the phone rang 562 times. Okay? The phone rang, the whole day was 562 times. So for the whole thing, we never rang more than 562 times. 562 total phone rings. I'm trying to figure out how many times it rang at lunch. Well, in the morning, I know it rang 156 times. Rings in the morning. 201 times in the afternoon. But that doesn't tell me anything about lunch. I'm missing something here. This strip diagram does not work this way. This is going to be a multi-step problem because I'm going to have to figure out multiple things. I have to figure out something before I can figure out how many times it rang at lunch. And in this case, you would have to figure out how many times it rang in the morning and how many times it rang in the afternoon. You'd have to add those up and then subtract from your total. You're going to have to take what you know, 156 rings in the morning, 200 rings in the afternoon. I should have an extra box over here. I should have 3 parts on the bottom because those 3 parts are going to equal 562. So my multi-step would be adding 156 and 201. It'd be adding those two together and then subtracting that sum from the total amount of rings, and that's going to tell you what's missing. You're going to continue practicing on the next slide.